Can animals sense when an earthquake is about to strike? Well, we know that here in Greece, a lot of times we have earthquakes, and there have been instances where dogs would warn their owners. They would bark uncontrollably, pulling them by the leg, telling them to get out somewhere. One man was saved when his dog pulled him into the boat when he was fishing, when a very big earthquake struck a while back. And in another village, the snakes started coming out 2 or 3 days before a major earthquake hit. And they were crawling on the sides of the houses, coming out of their nests from underground, crawling on the sides of the houses and even onto the rooftops. Can you imagine that sight? So, yeah, we do have that. Birds flying. We've seen pictures of buffalo leaving areas of Yellowstone before certain events there. Now, within minutes of this is written by Anne Quain, lecturer, University of Sydney, Australia, on The Conversation. She says, within minutes of Melbourne being rattled by earthquakes, my Victorian friends reported changes in the behavior of their animals. One friend wrote on social media that her dog Harvey stood in the hallway howling for 5 full minutes before the earthquake moved, obviously because they can hear better. So they're hearing earth sounds, which we cannot hear. So that's what they understand that's why they understand it's about to happen. A colleague reported his television reception went fuzzy, but when he walked outside to check the aerial, he noted an unusual and striking absence of bird song before he felt the quake. So the birds had left. My friend's cat Henry inexplicably disappeared before the quake, but returned home safe after a few hours. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below. Conversely, her rough collie Angie, who is terrified of storms, was reportedly totally chilled before, during, and after the seismic event. So there was no change in the collie. Now, earthquakes are unsettling, as we know, terrifying, potentially fatal. The 1989 Newcastle earthquake, injuring and taking lives. If our animal companions can give us a heads up when an event like this is about to happen, it could be truly life-saving, but can they really? Let's have a look at the evidence, she says. The scholarly literature provides dozens of anecdotal reports of companion animals, livestock, wildlife, and even insects behaving strangely before earthquakes. But a review of 180 publications reporting 700 records of abnormal or unusual animal behaviors prior to 160 earthquakes found the evidence correlating these behaviors with subsequent earthquakes was weak. The majority of it, maybe it's because people didn't notice that the animals were reacting very strangely before an earthquake. That's another thing we have to take into consideration. The majority of reports were anecdotal and were made after the earthquake, making them vulnerable to recall bias. Put simply, people may be more likely to interpret their animal's behavior as strange in the light of a particularly memorable or traumatic event. To establish that unusual animal behaviors can predict earthquakes, scientists would need to observe animals under controlled conditions, of course, for extended periods of time, long enough to be able to observe their behavior before, during, and after earthquakes. To be confident animals do indeed behave strangely before an earthquake, we'd need to also see them not behaving strangely when there is not an impending earthquake. Sadly, the evidence does not come close to satisfying this, but the authors of the review did find the supposed predictive behavior in animals occurred around the same time as foreshocks, smaller earthquakes that precede the main seismic event. If this is the case, then what people interpret as animals' ability to predict earthquakes may in fact be reactions to the vibrations or sounds from earthquakes that are too faint for us humans to detect. This would not be surprising, given that animals often outperform us when it comes to sensory perception, such as smell, And it makes sense given almost 60% of unusual animal behaviors associated with earthquakes occurred in the 5 minutes preceding the earthquake. Fright and flight, fear, anxiety, or distress triggered by foreshocks might explain why animals display behaviors such as vocalizing like Harvey the dog, the howling dog, or fleeing to somewhere they feel safer like Henry the disappearing cat. But of course, it's possible Harvey and Henry behaved like this for purely non-earthquake related reasons, and the timing was sheer coincidence. There are many reasons a dog may howl. A courier opens the front gate, for example, or a cat may go missing. Your cat may hear a loud noise and hide under the bed, but we tend to make the connection only when we're aware of the same stimuli. What we do know is that animals can be seriously affected by earthquakes, whether through injury, displacement, or compromised access to food and water. Thousands of animals, along with Christchurch earthquake, had lost their lives there, and many more animals were left homeless by property damage. Now, yesterday's quake, well, was written a few years ago. The quake in Australia, also important reminder for people with companion animals to include them in emergency planning. Dogs and cats should be identified with a collar and be tagged and microchipped. And don't forget to update the contact details if you move house or change your phone number, and that way you'll more easily be reunited with your beloved little pet. This is by Barry and Frankel on Conversation Creative Commons. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support.